Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. And alhamdulillah, we have another night and we have Silsila Mansi here, so we don't try to maybe start the program. The topic of tonight's program is Imam Mahdi. Of course, it's a very important topic, and it's about the Imam of our time. Yesterday we had the topic of Ahlul Bayt, which was basically kind of a general conversation about Ahlul Bayt, but tonight we want to focus on the Imam, the last member of the Ahlul Bayt, as we believe, who is the Imam of our time. So, inshallah, before basically getting into the conversation, I want to ask brothers to kind of relate yesterday's, because it seems to me the key role of Ahlul Bayt, as I understand, for at least one of the main roles of them, was being a role model, being the person who basically has all the qualities that we believe that is for the perfect human being, and they are kind of models for us to be able to see and basically in practice, not just as a message, but in a real human being, the collection of all those qualities that we believe we should basically achieve in some point. So, of course, we have Imam Zaman, and we had this conversation. I want you to kind of relate the yesterday's basically conversation to him, and give us just an introduction on the topic of tonight before inshallah starting questions.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Khaliqil Khalaiq Ajma'een, Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen, Sayyidina wa Mawlana Abil Qasim Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Wa ala ahli baytihi al-atyabin al-akharin al-hudati al-mahdiyyin. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we spoke yesterday about Ahlul Bayt and how it is that we can develop a relationship with Ahlul Bayt, and it was a bit of a conceptual, a bit of a theoretical discussion regarding the relationship of Ahlul Bayt to religious guidance and religious leadership. And from the role of Ahlul Bayt, we wanted to move towards an appreciation for who Ahlul Bayt are. In a sense, we want to take a little bit of a shortcut and say that if this is the role that the Quran says religion is to have, then we need to look at the different conceptions of religious leadership and religious guidance within Islam, and we need to see which of those schools of thought, which of those opinions is able to fulfill that role. And one of the key verses that we talked about when it came to Ahlul Bayt in general is verse 213 in Surah Al-Baqarah, in which Allah says that a major part of the goal of religion is to provide a means for people to get genuine, authentic, and guaranteed knowledge, to remove differences of opinion, to remove moral uncertainty. And so any conception of leadership in Islam should be able to solve that question. And that is directly connected to our belief in Imam Mahdi, the Imam of our time. Because that is the fulfillment of the purpose not just of Islam, but of every religion and every messenger that Allah sent, that God sent to humanity, to have a means by which people can perfect themselves at all levels. Perfect ourselves as individuals, perfect ourselves as moral agents, interacting with others, perfect ourselves as members of our families and our societies, fulfilling different roles, and perfect ourselves not just as units, but as collectives, as a community, and as a human family on the broadest and most global level. So just as when it comes to Ahlul Bayt, we want to approach an understanding of who they are and how we can relate to them on the basis of their goals. When it comes to Imam Mahdi, we will only really be able to understand the importance of that teaching and the authenticity of that teaching if we have a good sense of what the goals of Islam are and what the purposes in a worldly sense are for the Prophet to have been given this message. And that is explained, as we will discuss inshallah today, in the Quran. It's not something that you and I have to think about and deduce purely on the basis of our own intellect. But when we look around the world today, we see that it is a very important question. There are people who you and I certainly will not be comfortable naming as Muslims. But they pray, and they fast, and they recite the Quran, and many of them may even have memorized the Quran and studied Islamic sources for a long time. And the highest point of aspiration they have for Islam is to apply what they will think of as Islamic punishments, to enforce Islamic teachings about morality, about dress, about the banning of alcohol, about certain types of superficial teachings of Islam, and they consider that to be a success. And they think that is the purpose of a Muslim individual and a Muslim community. Now, you and I might say that that is something which is offensive to us as human beings, offensive to our moral sense as Muslims. But if those are at least some of the teachings which those groups will apply, if they are actual teachings of Islam, then on what basis do we say that for me to go and say that I am going to require hijab and I am going to require everyone to pray the 5 daily prayers and I am going to, have that checklist, that is not what a good Muslim should do. There are other Muslims who, maybe as a reaction to these extremist groups, they have summarized Islam as a very general and a very watered down personal morality. But other than that, their lives are secular. And so that is a challenge that we have in our time. And to find out what it is that we should be thinking of as our goal as a Muslim individual, as a Muslim society, we have to have a connection to Ahlul Bayt in general, but to the belief in the what the Shia know of as Imam al-Mahdi, or what we can say more generally is a belief in the current obligation and application of Islam's ideals. That is the general principle. That in our time, how is Islam to fulfill its purpose on all of the levels of human life, from the individual to the collective? And the application of that principle will come in the person of Imam Mahdi. So that is the structure that we want to try to explore in light of the Quran. And as you mentioned yesterday, we had a little bit of an introduction to Ahlul Bayt, but hopefully we'll be able to have more interaction and a little bit of greater participation from the audience, so that we'll have more of a conversation.
Sure. Thank you, brother. So, say about the Imam Zaman. I mean, for many of us who are coming from a Muslim background, heritage, and we were raised under basically education about Imam Mahdi, this is something that is basically very known to us and makes sense to us, and we have kind of some relation to that in our basically way of thinking about Islam and our faith. But I mean, thinking about the new person who is just to get to know Islam, talking about a person who we believe was born like more than 1,200 years ago, and he is a role model of time, and he's a leader of our time, and he's not invisible, but he's not basically in appearance like normal human being, but we don't know where he is, but we know that he is somewhere, but he has some certain qualities. So basically, I wanted to just briefly, before moving on to the more detailed discussion, just about, because even within Shia Islam, there are some minorities who do not believe about that Imam like the way that we do. So what is our basis to have a solid belief in him as being basically alive and being basically the person who is basically the one who will bring justice to the world and has all those qualities? Can you talk about that a little bit before moving on to the basic discussion? So the basis for our belief on such a person.
Why do we believe that such a person exists? There's two levels that we want to approach that question in. The second level is, why do we believe in an Imam who was born in a certain time, who was the son of a previous Imam, a religious leader, who we know of as Hujjat ibn Hassan al-Askari, the 12th Imam, born in Samarra in the year 255, or according to some narrations, 256 Hijri. And so that is a specific question, and a specific answer is required. And the answer to that second level is to look at the hadith and the evidence that we have from Islam that this is the individual who God has appointed to be the leader of our time. But the more general question, which has to come first, is to remove the doubt and the perhaps skepticism towards even considering this answer or this belief to be credible. I think when you said that for somebody who was born and raised in this tradition, it's easier to accept. That's probably what you were alluding to.
Sure.
Right? And that's an important question. Right? If we say that the Imam was born more than 1,100 years ago, and is alive and has been alive since then, and if we believe that this person is a religious leader, but you don't have direct access and I don't have direct access to that leader, and no one has had direct access in a superficial sense for centuries, then it might seem like that is something far-fetched. And so the more important question, I think, is for us to look at, is it far-fetched or is it not far-fetched? And the second question, which is a little bit of a historical and a little bit of a specific question, that is something that maybe we can discuss in general if it's needed, or we can even leave it for another opportunity. Is it far-fetched? I would say that for a Muslim, we would say that things are credible or they are far-fetched on the basis of what we know to be true from our religious sources. First and foremost, from the Quran itself. And what the Quran tells us is that life and death are something that do not follow this habitual pattern that you and I are used to. And if you hear somebody is alive who was born 140 years ago, you will be skeptical. And you have a right to be skeptical. That's not common. If you hear about somebody who is 2 years old and has mastered not just the recitation of Quran, but the commentary of the Quran, and can answer complex religious questions, you will be skeptical, and you have a right to be skeptical. But the reason for that skepticism is because those types of things are not customary. But the Quran tells us that in each of those cases, it is certainly within the power of Allah, and it is within the practice of Allah to stretch what is customary and what is normal and what is expected in order to accomplish a spiritual purpose. And one spiritual purpose is specifically that when you shake the normal expectations that a person has, it becomes easier for a person to see that something is a miracle. And let me give you an example. Let's say that I get sick, and I take some medicine, and gradually, over the course of the week that I'm taking the medicine, I get better. Generally, I will kind of think of that as an incident that took place in my life. But what if I get sick, and I take medicine, and it doesn't get better? And then I go to my regular doctor, and they're confused at my symptoms. And they refer me to a specialist. And the specialist does numerous tests, and they say this is something that we've never heard of, and there is no recognized treatment or recognized cure for the symptoms that you face. And then I get better all of a sudden. It's not gradual. It's not on the basis of any specific treatment. Which of the two am I likely to see the hand of God in more clearly? The second one, right? Especially if that cure came after a night of very fervent and very desperate prayer. But in reality, and according to our Islamic belief, which one does the hand of God enter into more? They're both equally a miracle. They're both equally from God. It's just that once we were looking at all of those intermediate material steps that God took in order to get us to the destination, and even though this should also be a reminder for us that cure comes from God, He is the one who cures. We might forget that. And we might simply stock up on that medicine, so the next time we get sick, we have the medicine. Right? And so sometimes Allah takes us through a detour, through a different path, because it's easier for us to appreciate the miraculousness of His guidance. It's not the case that this is a miracle and those normal incidents are not miracles. And so we find that the prophets of God also applied that. Right? Normally, human life is 70, 80 years.
You know, if you ask anyone, if you believe God is all power and He can make someone live 1200 years and have all those qualities, I would say the answer is yes. Another question is, do we have solid concrete proof?
We do have solid concrete proof.
That single person is actually someone that God did basically give him all those.
We do have solid and concrete proof that that God not only can do something. You know, God can create a unicorn,
right?
But why would He want to? And has He done it? We don't know. We do have solid evidence, though, that God has extended the life of a prophet or a religious guy beyond a normal life.
Yes.
We do have solid evidence that God has sent infallible guidance in the form of a child, who normally would not even expect it to be literate. So when it's not only in the realm of possibility, but it's also something that we find is part of our religious heritage and history.
But that doesn't prove that Imam.
No, it doesn't prove a specific belief about who the Imam is.
Right.
What it does do, though, or what it should do, though, is it should remove any sense that, well, this is far-fetched,
right,
or this is a fable,
yeah,
or it's possible, but I'm skeptical.
That's right.
So the first step, of course, is to understand that anything is possible for God.
Right. The
second step is to realize that not only are things possible, but they're not necessarily even far-fetched.
Right.
Everything is equally possible for God,
right,
and if there is something that God has done in the past, we shouldn't be skeptical that He might do it again in our own time. Now, the next step is for us to realize not just is it going to be possible, and not just is it going to be something that is not far-fetched, but it is something that is actually likely. That's the next step. And where does the likelihood come from? The likelihood comes from the fact that the purpose that Imam Mahdi, which is a universal belief of all Muslims, Sunni and Shia, the purpose that Imam Mahdi is going to fulfill is a uniquely miraculous purpose. Right? I mean, the fulfillment of a divine promise that all of humanity has prayed for. The establishment of justice throughout the world. Right? No prophet has been able to accomplish that goal. No prophet was given that task by Allah, and no prophet was able to do it. Prophet Sulaiman had a limited kingdom. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a limited kingdom. And all Muslims believe, with almost no exceptions, that Imam Mahdi is going to accomplish that. So given that the task is much more monumental than the task that was, when I say much more monumental, I'm not saying that to put down the Prophet. What I'm saying is that in terms of the application and the implementation of that divine promise, Imam Mahdi is going to take the divine message to a place that Prophet Sulaiman did not take it, that Prophet Isa did not take it, that even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not take it. And so we shouldn't be surprised, and in fact we should expect many of those miracles that were found in the life of Prophet Nuh, or that were found in the life of Prophet Isa, to exist. So now we've gone 3 steps. One is what you said, that yeah, every Muslim knows that God can do anything. The next step is that it's not far-fetched, it's happened before. The third step is that given the monumental task and the unparalleled task, it would make sense, we would expect there to be many different types of miracles associated with the life of this figure, to show that it is a divinely blessed and a divinely guided figure. Now, with this mindset, when we look at the historical narrations, we will see that there are numerous ahadith in Sunni and in Shi'i sources that speak of the fact that there will be a chain of religious guides. And so you have to start at the beginning of that chain and then follow through. You can't determine who is Imam Mahdi unless you have an understanding of who was his father and what was his claim and legitimacy to be the Imam. But when you have the mindset that I described, right, then it will be easier for you to be able to have a healthy skepticism, but not an unhealthy cynicism. And the short answer to the second part of the question, what is the evidence for it? The evidence for it is that there was a continuous chain of guidance that was represented by the Imams from Ahlul Bayt. And it was something that passed through from the 11th Imam, from Imam Hasan Askari, to the 12th Imam. And almost all of those who believed in Imamah, who knew the Imams, they were shaken by the death of the 11th Imam, as you would expect. And there was some time of confusion, and there was some time of trying to re-examine the ahadith and understand exactly what was going on. That's expected. But the vast majority, almost all of them, did go through that brief period of re-examination, and they were convinced that the 12th Imam, Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, was born, and that he was the Imam of their time and the Imam of our time. And that continuity, and the fact that it was something which took place, in the full illumination of history. It wasn't something that was hidden. That is the strongest evidence that we have that the belief in this Imam is accurate. Now that might be a little bit different from what some people assume. They think that there was a whole lot of uncertainty and the belief in the 12th Imam was not so clear at the time. But if you actually look at the historical record, right, look at the companions of Imam Ali Naqi alayhi salam, Ali al-Hadi, look at the companions of Imam Hassan Askari alayhi salam, and you will see that if you count those companions, almost all of them, either immediately or after a period of contemplation, were able to affirm and to submit to the imamat of the 12th Imam. So assuming that you followed the path of imamat to that point, then it's a very easy step to go to the 12th Imam. The only hurdle is it far-fetched? Is it unlikely? And if we've crossed that hurdle, then it becomes quite easy in a direct path.
So, it was a time that there was a lot of restriction on Imam Hassan Askari. So it wasn't an easy environment for him to communicate with the world, right? So given that, we still believe there is enough evidence and there is enough basically basis that we should basically accept. It's a certain basically message from him that then his son is going to be the final basically Imam and the Imam Mahdi that is introduced by the Prophet in the Sunni scripture, right? So that's what you basically...
The Imam Hassan Askari lived in a time when he was politically under surveillance, that's certainly true. But he also lived in a time when the Shi'i community had established itself and there was a wide circulation of books, a wide circulation of scholars, and it was not a case where the Imam was alone without any kind of communication with his people and without any kind of a basis for people to practice the school of Ahlul Bayt. Those factors were there. And we have the names in history of people like Abdul Azim al-Hassani, who was actually a relative of our 9th and our 10th imams. We have Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri. We have Abu Hashim al-Ja'fari. So we have numerous companions, and some of them, they're just names that I can take right now. But the point is that there was a continuity, and the flow or the movement from the 11th Imam to the 12th Imam was relatively smooth. It was smooth in the sense that after contemplation, almost all of those who were followers of Ahlul Bayt, who were followers and scholars among the students of Imam Hassan Askari and Imam Ali Naqi, they accepted the 12th Imam. Right? So, in my mind, there's two major challenges that need to be overcome. One is it far-fetched? And I addressed that.
Yeah.
And the second would be, was Imam Hassan Askari the right Imam? Right? And that is a question that comes from before. But the next step is one that I think is relatively straightforward and relatively easy. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sheikh Hussain, I'd like to welcome you to our session. And do we have permission to also invite him to the stage if you would like to participate in the conversation? So you're welcome to join us, inshallah, and we'll benefit also from your presence.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience at this point before we move on to, because as I said, everyone is welcome to raise hand and ask questions, but we would want to stop.
Please do ask questions. So the discussion that we have,
we want to open,
it follows maybe a little bit of a theoretical aspect.
So basically what I understand is that I guess our Sunni brothers and sisters, at least some of them, believe that there will be a leader, some that will come later. But so I guess the difference is that we believe that that's son of Imam Hassan al-Askari, but they believe that he will come later and he will be born. So is that right in the first place? And what difference it makes for us?
That's a good question. Right? Is it correct that the Sunnis believe that that Imam Mahdi will exist but is not yet born? The vast majority of Sunnis do believe that there will be a figure who will be known as the Mahdi. There is a hadith which is attributed to the Prophet, and it's narrated in some Sunni sources, I believe in Sunan Ibn Majah, in which the Prophet is reported to have said that La Mahdiya illa Isa ibn Maryam, that there is no Mahdi except Prophet Isa. Prophet Isa, alayhi salam, he will return to this world and he is the Mahdi. However, the vast majority of Sunni scholars have rejected that hadith. It's not just the Shia who say that's not accurate, but almost all of the authorities of hadith in the Sunni world, they have discussed that hadith and they've said it's not accurate. So there will be a Mahdi. And one of the reasons why the Sunnis have rejected this hadith is they say this is one hadith, right? Its chain of narration is also da'if, that's a specialist discussion. But in terms of the content, it goes against many ahadith that say that the Mahdi will be a descendant of Fatima salamullahi alayha. So obviously Isa alayhi salam is not a descendant of Fatima, and therefore from a Sunni perspective, if I have tens of ahadith that say the Mahdi will be a descendant of Fatima salamullahi alayha, and one sort of lonely, weak hadith that says that there is no Mahdi except Isa alayhi salam, which one would I accept? Right? So that's, you're right. There is a shared belief. And the difference, of course, is that in the Shia opinion, and in the Shia belief, the Mahdi is not just the son of Imam Hassan Askari. That's not the important point. The Mahdi is the continuing link in a chain of divine guidance. In a chain of divine guidance. And that chain is not just political. That chain is not just legal, answering a fiqh question. That chain is religious and spiritual, which has implications for law, and it has implications for politics, and it has implications for all other aspects of our life. What difference does it make? The difference it makes is that in the Shi'i belief, Islam is the perfect religion, and in every generation, Allah has provided a source for human guidance. A human being that we can connect to, and we can derive religious guidance. In some cases, that religious guidance is easy, because it's exterior. I can go to Imam Ja'far Sadiq if I live in his time, and I can say I need an istikhara. Or I can go to Imam Ja'far Sadiq and I can say I need an answer to a religious question. Right? But in some cases, it's not overt and exterior. It's inward, and the answer given and the guidance provided will be not so overt and externally visible, but it's in fact just as or even more profound. You have a source for religious guidance. There is a continual divine chain of religious leadership. In the Sunni world, today, no such means of religious guidance exists. So, just to summarize, if I think that the point of an imam is for me to figure out, the question I have about a law of fasting, I might say, well, the Sunnis don't have somebody who can give an authoritative answer. I don't have somebody who can give an authoritative answer. They refer to their fuqaha. We refer to our fuqaha and our maraji. We're all the same, right? Now, that's not necessarily the case, but it might seem to be a valid question. But if the point is not to get an answer to a religious question, and it's not. If the point is for there to be a chain of religious and spiritual guidance, for our heart and for our mind and for our soul. And Allah has placed that chain always at the ready. When I as an individual am worthy, I can connect to the Imam in an individual capacity. And when we as a society are ready, our society can connect to the Imam in a collective capacity. Then we find that there is a world of difference between the Shi'i and the Sunni perspective. Because in the Shi'i perspective, for the individual and the collective, the channel and the source is there. And for the Sunni community, the channel and the source will come sometime in the future, but does not exist. So I think that if we have the presence also of Shaykh Islam, if you'd like to
Sheikh, please sit down
include him in the
in
conversation.
Yes, please.
Our topic.
Yeah, I can share the microphone. But let me ask you a question. So, I know that we have only like about 20 minutes time, and there are a couple of questions that I like we have discussed in this event. So there's really one about how we benefit from Imam while he's absent. And that's a key question. How we even relate to him in our life while he's not present, like the way that we see basically other human beings. That's one question. And the second is about the zuhur or the riyamah, when he appears, and what we know about the things that would happen when he's about to come, and what to expect to happen when he comes and afterward. So what is really going to be the world looking like when he comes? When he basically announces and appears, and when he tries to transition the world towards where it is supposed to be, and then when he reaches takes the world to where it is supposed to be, if he is supposed to do, because that question of inna Allah yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. So maybe it's not just him by himself. There is like basically it's the whole population that is going to basically support him on his mission and work with him. So those are the basically two questions. So before he appears, our relationship to him, and then what to expect about him coming and the things that would happen afterward. So if you, any of the brothers?
Would you like to begin? Some thoughts?
Okay, so maybe I'll start with some before
Yes.
the. Actually, I didn't come to actually participate in the discussion. I was going to listen and then also see my close friend, Sayyid Sulaiman. But alhamdulillah, since I'm here, let me share some thoughts and inshallah you'll complete them. One of the things, the first part of the question was the idea of what will happen before, or what is the role of us and maybe the whole world.
The relationship between us and him supposed to be for us. What are we supposed to do to have that balanced relationship while he is on absence? I think things has been on absence.
Okay. So let me kind of share, maybe even expand it a little bit, because I feel like it would touch on a little bit of what our practical responsibility is. Right? As opposed to us just sitting back and waiting and seeing what signs are there, and has this sign happened or that sign happened. What are we supposed to do? What's supposed to happen with the world? What I've kind of come to discover based on some of the ahadith is this. The idea that Islam is a religion, that when it is established, it has to be that the local population wants it. It's not imposed, right? If we want to say that there will be, we believe, divine justice, a global government, the kingdom of God on the face of the earth, we don't believe that that's something which will simply be imposed, ISIS style, that kind of a khilafah. So I'll give you an example from the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. When he finally became the Khalifa from an external point of view, and everybody recognized him as Khalifa, the people insisted and they were begging, and the Imam was like, no, I'll be a wazir. And they insisted, and then the Imam came in. So it was a demand from the public. Now, when I look at some of the ahadith to see kind of what the world will be like, and then also what our responsibility is for the coming of the Imam, there's some ahadith which kind of act as prophecies, but prophecies where we see where we fit in. For instance, there's one that mentions that before the Imam returns, knowledge will shift from Qom from Kufa to Qom, and then from Qom it will spread to the rest of the world. This hadith is very interesting. When we say Qom, Kufa and Najaf are next to one another. From that area, then the houses shifting to Qom, that's something that we've all seen. I think right now there's over 100,000 students who are non-Iranian in Qom who are studying. And then obviously those brothers like myself, like Sayyid Suleiman in the past, because now he's here, alhamdulillah, would be going back and they were then trying to spread the message of Islam. Now what happens is when we're spreading the message of Islam, it's not the case, and even based on those ahadith, that everyone in the world becomes Muslim. That particular hadith that I'm talking about, it says that knowledge will spread from Qom to the rest of the world, the east and the world, east and the west, but it won't be that everybody becomes Muslim. It says rather, nobody will be uninformed about Islam. Mustadhaf in the religion. Everybody will know what Islam is, but not that everybody will become Muslim. So one of the things that would happen with that, and I apologize for taking long time, I want to summarize it really quickly, is that if people came to know what Islam was, what Islam is, the solutions that Islam has for their lives, at the very least, people wouldn't be enemies of Islam. They wouldn't be fearful of Islam. They might not be strong enough to make that choice to live as God wants them to live, but at least they wouldn't be fearful that the Mahdi's coming, what is he going to do, right? They would kind of, if they got a chance to hear what Islam is, see how miserable their own situation is, right? How unfair it is, and we see some of that now. The people in the world are kind of waking up to the idea that our rulers are the problem. The system, the banking system, those who are in power, they're the problem. And if they came to know what Islam is, that there is a solution, there is a righteous individual. And again, not that everybody become Muslim, but rather that they are kind of informed of what Islam is, what the plan of the Imam is. Then the other part, which would be our part, would be that in addition to informing others and practicing Islam, which is really important, kind of being obedient to the Imam. Right? In order for a revolution to happen at a grand scale, you would probably need something like this. The local population is unhappy with the tyranny that's there. Then there's a group that actually will follow the Imam, obey the Imam, listen to the Imam, and then you have those people who are holding on the remnants of the old regime and the people who are willing to massacre the people, tyrants basically. So the tyrants and their slaves who are willing slaves, those individuals. But the vast majority of the population are people who want to be free, want to be liberated, and then you have an army that comes in and kind of liberates them. So with that, the idea of spreading the message of Islam, us being those people who first practice Islam, and us being a way of people getting to know Islam, the world getting ready in that way, hearing that there's a wonderful person, and then the readiness and the followers, meaning people would be actually following the Imam before his return.
Thank you very much. So, Steve, do you want to add some comments?
That was a very comprehensive answer. I want to actually maybe address one question that I think might have been in the back of people's minds from yesterday and perhaps today. It certainly is something that a lot of people ask. If this belief in Ahlul Bayt and Imam Mahdi is accurate, then how come the majority of Muslims don't have this belief? How is that even feasible? Many of us, we generally take things to be credible when they're commonly believed. It's difficult to be a contrarian. Well, to answer that question, at least one part of the answer, I think, is to recognize that Islam came with a certain promise. Right? The Prophet was told to say, وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Right? At the time of entering Mecca, according to some commentaries. Now, for many Muslims, that was a very straightforward command. The Prophet was ordered by God to say, truth has come and falsehood has been vanquished. جَاءَ الْحَقِّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ. And they probably thought that the conquest of Mecca and then the spread of conquest throughout the Muslim world, that's going to take care of evil, it's going to take care of injustice and oppression. And over time, people realized that, wait a minute, just conquering a lot of territory and bringing it under the flag of Islam doesn't solve all of our social and human problems. We need to have some depth of understanding of the religion. It's kind of like, if a child is growing up with a rich father to bail them out of any mistakes they might make, that child will not develop the human sophistication and experience to be able to excel. You need to first strike bottom and not be able to call your rich uncle, call your contacts, and figure things out on your own wits before you're able to develop and to grow. So the reason why the majority of Muslims didn't realize about Ahlul Bayt, and they might not have realized the importance of Imam Mahdi, one of the reasons is that they never realized that in the beginning, it might have not been so clear that you need to have a ma'soom, because Islam was so much better than the alternative. And the mushrikeen were so oppressive that even a deficient Islamic system and society was far better. But over time, we were expected to gradually develop some sophistication and realize that just the name and label of Islam is not enough. There needs to be some depth. And when things require growth and when things require that kind of experience, it's always the case that a minority of people will be able to be early adopters. That's part of any societal situation that we might have. And so it's not unexpected, but it's expected. Now, how does that relate to your question? It reminds us that the role of a believer trying to make a connection to the Imam has gone through gradual progress. Among the followers of Imam Ali, there were many people who thought that Imam Ali's main role was to be a good political ruler, a good Khalifa or a good Wali or a good governor. And then, over time, right, the Imams expressed to their followers that, look, if you want to have a good governor to be able to accomplish his goals, he needs to have followers who can withstand that message. And if a good leader doesn't have good followers, it's not going to be able to accomplish anything. And that's when the Zaydis split off from the main body of the followers of the Imams. They continued that political focus, but the Imams started an intellectual focus. And the intellectual focus began with law. And then once Imam Baqir and Imam Sadiq alayhim as-salam, they gave people the guidance of Islamic law, then they began to give them guidance in Islamic theology. In Islamic theology, it began towards the end of Imam Ja'far Sadiq's life with students like Hisham ibn al-Hakam, and continued in the time of Imam Rida alayhi salam and the later Imams. And so now the Imams developed one step further. Not just politics, but religious learning. Religious learning is not just law, but also theology and a comprehensive understanding of Islam. Now what remains? What remains is that people might think it is exterior learning. The Imams have a lot of knowledge that they have studied and learned from the Prophet and from the previous Imams, and that's pure knowledge and they can convey it and that'll solve our problems. And so the next step is for Allah to remind us that it's not just exterior learning, but it is a connection to God. And perhaps that is the wisdom behind why we have our 9th Imam and our 10th Imam who reached the rank of Imamah as children, and also our 12th Imam. God gave us that kind of next step. So we realize that Islam requires content, and then the content also is not just about having the authentic copy of a book of Islamic law or a book of Islamic tafsir, but it's about having a connection to God. Having an Imam who is a child, who obviously is not old enough to have studied, is the most direct way to get that message. And then there is one last step, which is the step that was taken in the time of the 12th Imam. And that step is that people might have thought that you have to have a connection to God, but it is a process of exterior learning. It is a process of going to visit the Imam and hearing the authentic answer of Islam and then going back and practicing it. And the final step is for Allah to remind us that Islam as a religion and the role of the Imam as a religious leader is not just about the exterior world at all. It's about the very fabric of existence. It's about the very fabric of the universe. It is interior and intrinsic to creation. And so when the Imam is in ghaiba, and we don't have that exterior connection to the Imam, then it's sort of a nudge in the direction for us to realize that your connection to the Imam, it needs to be deeper than having a question answered, having a meeting, learning something. It is something that needs to come through prayer, and through personal development, and through humility, and through sincerity. It's not to deny those other exterior aspects, but it's to take us one step further, to realize that the nature of the message of the Imams is something that goes into the very fabric of creation. So we take our eyes away from the exterior aspect and we come into the interior aspect. And I think that's what will allow people to be able to seek divine guidance. As Shaykh Osama said, that one of our main tasks is to try to take part in spreading the message of Islam towards those who don't have it. Well, that can come if we understand the depth.
Can you take it one step further and just make it into some practical advice about, okay, what should every individual do in order to develop that relationship with the Imam? What are your advices?
So a few steps, and inshallah, then we'll also, I don't know how much time we have, but
Probably have less than 10 minutes.
less than 10 minutes, so I'll be very
5
brief,
minutes.
inshallah, and then inshallah we can have some brief thoughts from Shaykh Osama as well. The most important thing that I think that we can do, there is a hadith that the benefit that we get from the 12th Imam is like the hadith that we get from the sun when it is behind the clouds, right? And in fact, when the sun is behind the clouds, especially if you're imagining this image was being given in a hot climate, that sun is much better than the sun that's burning down on you and drying out everything that exists and burning everything. When it's behind the clouds, it's still giving the heat, it's still giving the life, the light and the nourishment, but it's not something that is going to potentially be as too hot or as scary. And so it's an even greater benefit. Of course, the sun, when it's there, it's beneficial. But when it's behind the cloud, it might even be augmented. So the most important thing that we can do is for us to try to create a feeling of need within our souls for religious guidance, for that sun behind the clouds. And I say that because generally in all of our lives, we've filled up our lives with a bunch of distractions. When it comes to our aspirations for justice, we get involved in politics. Maybe we vote, maybe we have a pet cause that we partake in. When it comes to moral questions, we fill ourselves up with shallow certainties. We have all of these different things that we've filled up. We don't have a gap. The most important thing that I think we can do is to take away some of that arrogance and that certainty, and therefore be receptive for divine guidance. Have a space where we need to pray to God to connect us to the Imam, to protect us from sin. And I'll stop there right now because we're brief in time. If we do have some more moments after Shaykh Osama, then maybe I can add a few more thoughts. Would you like to please add some insights to what practically can we do to connect to the Imam and to develop a relationship with the Imam?
So when it comes to our practical role and what we practically need to do in order to ready ourselves for the return of the Imam, one important step is to realize what it's like to have an Imam. What's the Imam supposed to do? We want to be living as if the Imam is witnessing our actions, which he is. He's witnessing this gathering and the gathering of so many mu'mineen and mu'minat all over the world. He witnesses our personal lives. He sees, he's connected with us. He knows us. We have a hadith from the Ahlul Bayt that one of the mu'mineen says that I went to pray Salatul Jummah with Imam Ali, right? He was there in Kufa. I went to go over and I went to offer prayers behind Salatul Jummah. He says I wasn't feeling very well, but then I went and I took a ghusl. I started to feel a little bit better. This guy's name is Rumayla. So Rumayla says I went over and I started participating in the khutbah, listening to the wali of my time. He says during the middle of the khutbah I started to feel sick. Again, not feeling very well. He says after the khutbah the Imam came and the Imam started to talk to me. He said we went to the Imam's residence outside of the masjid perhaps. The Imam says you weren't feeling very well. And so we had this shock that you Imam, you realize that I'm sick? He says that yeah, when you fall sick, we fall sick. He says when you make dua, we say Ameen. When you don't make dua, when you're sick, we pray for you. Right? This idea of the Imam being present in our lives, none of us are just a number. The Imam knows us personally. Okay, well, what does that mean? Are there any responsibilities then? Are there anything that I'm supposed to do if I'm really ready for this Imam? Well, one of them is the idea that one of the most important and fundamental tasks, which is the preliminary of everything else that the Imam is going to do, is that the Imam will establish a divine government and remove all of these other forms of government. So one of the things as mu'mineen, as believers, is to realize that this current government and all forms of government are wrong. They're illegitimate. No one but the Ahlul Bayt has the right to rule. No one but the Ahlul Bayt has the right to rule. And as a believer, as a follower of the Imam, someone who's waiting for justice, I'm working actively, like the Imam of my time, and like all of the other previous Imams, to establish this kind of government. Right? But I don't recognize this authority. It doesn't mean running red lights or running amok or anything like that, but I know that this form of government isn't legitimate, and I'm waiting for that. Secondly, in my personal life, how much am I actually acting like the Imam is seeing my actions? Am I obedient? We say the Imam has to come, and he needs, like Sayyid was saying, that he needs a group of followers, people who recognize the depth, who also follow the mission. It's just not just an intellectual discussion. How much am I personally, and I start with myself, and again, all the mu'mineen and mu'minat, how much are we actually living our lives in obedience to the Imam in every aspect of our lives? My job, my family, my occupation, my school, in so many areas. We want to be actually living like that. So if we can do that, I recognize what the mission of the Imam is. Of course, those lofty spiritual goals are even much higher, more higher than we can imagine. But I start off with the idea of not even recognizing any other authority than the Imam. And then my practical life, it's the Imam who rules over my personal, social, political, and even familial life.
And perhaps one of the reasons why Allah insists on informing us that there's always a human being who is the focal point of religious guidance is because of that profound psychological effect that it has on us. It's not just a psychological or symbolic teaching, it is very real. But the reason why Allah will have put that in place is because Allah is the creator of our body and He knows our psychology because He put it in us. And so the recognition that the Imam knows us personally, the recognition that the Imam is aware of our actions, that is something that will be a very profound reminder for us to live our lives in a slightly more aware and a much more spiritual way than if we just think that we are kind of on our own and God is not going to hold us to account until the Day of Judgment.
I guess we only have 1 minute to the azan, so if you want to do some prayer.
Sure. There's one aspect that I think that's very important that we haven't really had a chance to touch on. And so just very briefly, because we don't have time, I will mention a few verses of the Quran in translation. And the Quran speaks of the fact that Islam was sent by God in order to eradicate all falsehood and all evil and all injustice. And as I said, in the beginning, people might have thought that just to have a caliph who's a decent person, or at least a Muslim in name, that's enough to accomplish that purpose. But as Islamic society grows and develops, and as we grow and develop, we become much more fine-tuned to the fact that you need to be much more knowledgeable and much more pious to accomplish that goal. And so during this month of Ramadan, let's remember these verses of the Quran. Since we are short on time, I'll just mention One of the verses, this is a verse of Surah As-Saf and Surah Tawbah, it's repeated in the Quran, that هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. God is the one who sent his prophet with guidance and with the devotion of truth, the religion of truth, so that it will overcome all other religion, even if the unbelievers be averse. Think about what that means, intellectually, and in terms of practice, and in terms of what kind of people we need to be. And if we connect to this verse and other verses of the Quran, that is probably the strongest reason in my mind for us to realize that only the Shi'i conception of Islam can be right. Because it is not possible for Islam to solve every moral problem and to answer every intellectual objection that might exist in the mind of any human being, to provide the solution and the answer, unless there is a ma'soom. These verses, through contemplation, are probably the most direct way for us to appreciate the beauty and the authenticity of Shi'i Islam. And this brings us now connecting the Prophet and the Quran and Ahlul Bayt and Imam Mahdi that we've been talking about over several days. Because it is one message and it is one goal, and this is the way that it is going to be fulfilled. I apologize that we did take over a little bit more than our time, but it was good that we were able to benefit also from the participation and insights of Sheikh Osama. And with that, now we can prepare for Salah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Brothers, if we can get